so I'm taking my time on my ride. Oh, I love that. We're on?
Live from the Tyler Media Broadcast Complex, it's The Ride with Mac Mullings and Chad Alexander.
I'm taking my time on my ride.
All right, welcome back into the show. The last hour, we wrapped up the Attorney General debate last night that involved Mike Hunter, sitting Attorney General, and his opponent, Gittner Drummond. And there's another debate that's coming up. This will be on August the 24th, 6 o'clock. It's a Friday night, and you'll actually be able to attend the debate if you want to. It's going to be held at the City Presbyterian Church, 829 Northwest 13th Street. Now, this info I'm grabbing is from NonDoc. You can check out nondoc.com for all the info, but that is the State Superintendent for Public Instruction. It'll be Joy Hofmeister debating against Linda Murphy, and Linda joins us on the phone. Linda, thanks for calling us on the ride. How you doing?
Hi, Mac. I'm doing great.
Yeah. So are you excited for the debate?
Well, yes, I'm ready for that. I think that's great. We have had no meetings in all of the Republican meetings statewide where Joy Hofmeister has come. She has not been at any of them except one out of about 50 that I've been to statewide. So it's time, for the public to see. I wish it were earlier in the race.
Right.
4 days before the election is a little tough for enough people to get that information, but, I'm glad we're having it.
Right, right. That is true. That's a good point. It is the 24th, yeah. The 28th is the runoff. What, I've had the privilege of sitting down and chat with you, not on the air or anything, but just in conversation. Who is Linda Murphy? What made you want to run for superintendent?
Well, I'm an educator. I have been certified by the State Department of Education for 30 years. Certified double certification in special education, and also a standard elementary certificate. Teaching K through 8th grade is what it was when we were given the certification at that time. Standard elementary, so I'm certified in several subject areas as well. This is the work that I love. I love education. It's just where my heart is, and I taught in the public school classroom in Caddo County and in Osage County. Then I worked in a private clinical setting working with children and adults who had visually related learning problems. A lot of the special ed kids that I'd worked with that were labeled as LD, especially learning disabled, they have average or above IQ, but there's something interfering with the learning process. I found that many of those students had visual development problems, and they would be tested for vision, and we would say, well, they have perfect vision when they had 20/20. But that's only clear vision at 20 feet. So that's eyesight. And the visual skills needed for reading, writing, doing desk work, those are really very fine muscle controls of the eye that some people don't have well developed. So I loved working in that as well. I traveled around the United States and spoke for a foundation out of Santa Ana, California, for research and education in that field. Spoke to many teachers around the state of Oklahoma at that time for in-service training to identify these students. We did probably 200 workshops for in-service training for teachers through regional service centers, education service centers that we had at that time, and just individual school districts. So this has been my field really all of my life. I think that what we need is leadership in that office, and I was very concerned with the 9-day walkout of teachers and the misinformation and lack of understanding that a lot of people had about what was happening there. We had a lot of different groups that were there, and individuals, of course. They weren't all coming from one group, per se, of teachers. In fact, we had busloads of union workers that the president of the AFL-CIO said came to the state capitol from their AFL-CIO offices. So those union workers were also at the state capitol, but the teachers that were there were from various mindsets as far as their political perspective. There are many less OEA members than there were 30 years ago in Oklahoma as far as the percentage of teachers. And yet at the end of 9 days, we saw the OEA president holding the microphone, really controlling the dialogue that was out in the media about what was going on with negotiating with the legislature, supposedly. But at the end of 9 days, she couldn't articulate or say what her goal was, and it just kind of dwindled down and finally was stopped. Now, there were a lot of teachers there that were there, really to find out what's going on, to talk to their legislators that were not part of that OEA leadership. So I have to separate that out. But I'm disturbed about that, that we would have a state superintendent who was elected with $150,000 went out from the OEA to elect her in 2014.
Right. I'm glad
that it went into a dark fund.
Yeah.
So that's a disturbing fact. I think Republicans should be aware of.
I'm glad you brought up the teacher walkout. I was going to ask you actually what you took away from that, and being someone who sort of you cut your teeth in the classroom teaching and all. I mean, it's a passion. What was it? What was the level of disappointment? But you pretty much just nailed it right there.
Yeah, well, I certainly understand the teachers' concern about pay and salary increase that's needed. I agree with that, as most people across Oklahoma do. It was just the fact that we ended up with 9 days and the OEA leadership holding the mic when they don't even really represent the teachers. They don't represent a huge portion like they used to. They might have maybe half of the teachers statewide. I don't even think it's that.
Right.
Probably more like 40% now. But a lot of teachers don't want to belong to the OEA. For one thing, it's part of the NEA, the National Education Association, which has some very radical left ideology, not just ideas, but they put it in resolutions and have become even more aggressive politically. So I think that's what we really saw was a far left political move to get people elected in November in Oklahoma that will support the union and their far left ideas on the national level. Now, a lot of teachers that belong to it don't maybe even know that, but they need to study this issue.
Right. This is it's Linda Murphy joining me on the ride here. She's a candidate for State Superintendent Public Instruction. We talked about there's a debate on Friday, August 24th. She's running against Joy Hofmeister. Hey, Linda, you mentioned unions and stuff. Are there just too many hands involved when it comes to education here in the state? I mean,
well, I'm not opposed to people joining a union or unions existing, but I just think people need to know exactly what they do represent, what their goals are, and where their money goes when they pay their dues. That's my point about unions.
Yeah.
And that the state superintendent is elected to represent the people of the state, not any particular one group of people, regardless of how much money is given in to help elect them.
Yeah.
And I just saw those two things coming together there, and that was very disturbing. But beyond the unions and the organizations that teachers belong to, I have a goal for excellence in education that we can achieve without losing local control. We've lost a lot of local control that we need to regain in our testing, in the curriculum to a degree, but the curriculum will be changed even more to align with the current testing unless we really get testing that is controlled by us. Right now, it's nationally aligned.
Right. Okay. Well, what do you say to someone who says there's way too many school districts and then also or 4-day schools? What's your take on that?
Well, I do think that we need to look at certain areas of the state where we have a lot of expenditure going out and see if it is justified. And I think if we do that research, we will have a good solution for what we need to do with administrative costs. But more than the smaller districts that are out there, numerous in certain areas, I'm looking at a very big example of administrative costs, which is the Tulsa Public School District, where we see excessive amounts of administrative costs being spent there. And yet the test scores are still very low. In fact, they're lower than they were 4 or 5 years ago. students in 3rd and 4th grade are coming in at like 36, 37% passing the reading test. And that's a horrible situation. We need to focus on academics and not on a lot of reform ideas, which are really experiments.
Yeah.
And that's what we're getting right now, and we're paying for that.
I saw a story earlier today nationally, and I don't really recall what state it was. I want to say it was maybe Michigan or something, but in a district, 2,400 students and some of the educators couldn't pass one of the tests.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we have a lot of excellence out across the state. And some of these smaller schools are some of our very best examples of that. So that's one reason I'm not for just automatic, top-down, forced consolidation, because we will be throwing the baby out with the bathwater in a lot of situations. We need to look closely at how much money is brought in that district, local funding, how much state funding is spent, how many students it's serving. We just need to look at the overall picture. And some districts are small, but they're far apart, and there's a transportation issue that we need to look at, the distance. But we also just need to look at the cost of consolidation, because sometimes it really does not save money. So there are a lot of misconceptions out there. I will say this also about small school districts. When you have a smaller district, you have a closer representation for the parents. We've got some of our very best curriculum with satisfied parents, with communities and parents working together across the state. And some of our biggest problems, our biggest opposition that we see rise up about curriculum, about methods and materials, come from these big districts.
Yeah.
So sometimes when they get so big, parents have little to no voice, even as a group of parents.
Yeah. Linda Murphy, candidate for Oklahoma State Superintendent for Public Instruction, joining me right here on the ride. And, with the passing of 788 back in June, and then now, all the things with it possibly being on the ballot in November, we do see public schools, the boards are actually kind of ramping up their drug testing and things like that. Do you have a take or a comment on some of those?
Well, I have confidence that we have administrators across the state. I know a number of them have spoken out about some of the changes they're making, and this is what I believe we have. I believe we have a lot of well-educated, very good professionals in education, and we need to let our local administrators and teachers work together for best solutions, and then bring those very best ideas to the state level at the State Department of Ed to share, but not to mandate so much as we have seen done in the past.
Yeah.
Because that leaves us with a lot of different districts where people can innovate, create, use their entrepreneurial ideas to come up with better solutions than we might get in a quickly passed piece of legislation that ends up doing more harm than good from the state level.
Yeah. Well, your experience and everything, what do you think is the strong point that you'll bring to the office of State Superintendent, and what do you look forward to maybe learning, and maybe that's something new that you think is going to be a challenge, but you're up for it?
Well, I think it's going to be a wonderful experience to be State Superintendent and work with the administrators and teachers across the state with a much more broad base of input than what I believe we've seen in the State Department up to this point. True local control, that is my focus. The current state superintendent testified before Congress that she wants them to hold us accountable in Oklahoma. That's the opposite of what I believe. We need to hold ourselves accountable, and we need to have the freedom to do that. We need the authority and the responsibility coming together for the teachers and the administrators to make decisions. And the State Department of Ed has an enforcement arm in the Office of Accreditation where we can actually go out and check and see how schools are doing. So there's a way to work this with good accountability, but it needs to be local control. So that's my bottom line. Mm-hmm. LEARN is my acronym for what I'm standing for: local control, education excellence, academic standards, returning money to the classroom, and now, because now is the time that we can do that.
I like that. Nice. I like that. Hey, you got to
you.
give me some encouragement because my daughter will be starting first grade. I can't believe that she's already going to be in a first grade classroom. But as you would tell every parent with a young kiddo that way, how is it going to make me feel better about her growing up so fast?
Well, I just say read to them a lot, spend that bedtime, story time together, and that is going to give you a close relationship. I'm sure you already do that, but I really think that can't be overemphasized. And that reading time and listening time, they don't have to do all the reading. They can listen. And those skills are very important too. Language development, character development. You pick out stories that, teach them good lessons about life and about, geography, history. There's just a world of learning and interest for conversation.
Yeah.
And I've got older children now, and I'm so thankful for many of the things I was able to talk with them about when they were younger that they're still interested in, and we have great conversations.
Yeah. I've said before here on the show that if you ever chose a year to get plugged into the issues happening in this state of ours, this was, with the walkout and things like that, it was definitely a year, and it was a challenging and difficult year. So
right.
The next generation is obviously, the focus you have on it, and I love that. LERN. That was great. I like that. LEARN.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And so now, we do now have an opportunity with the walkout whether people look at it as good, bad, necessary, unnecessary, however they see it, it did create a situation where we have a great conversation about education, and we can take that and make lemonade with it and just go forward with good new involvement of more people across the state, and that's a good thing.
Okay. Jeremy was laughing over me on the other side of the glass there because I was saying LEARN, but I said LERN, like learn.
Oh.
Well, but you know what? He's from Prague, so I'm sure that somebody out there says learn, and they would spell it LERN, I'm sure.
You're probably right, Mac.
Would you be surprised if I actually lost in a spelling bee in third grade because I put an E on the end of the word goat?
Well, our phonics, our spelling can be kind of tricky because we have some words like that where there's a silent E, but
yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny to be explaining to the 6-year-old about how different words mean. Like, she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, we'll get it. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. Don't worry about it, man.
Right. We have to tell the students sometimes these don't really make sense sometimes, but this is the way it is.
Exactly.
You do visual memory on some things that are not necessarily logical.
Yeah. Linda Murphy, candidate for State Superintendent. Hey, how can they keep tabs on you? How can they follow you and even donate to your campaign and things like that?
Sure. If you will come to my website, it has all of that there, a lot of information, donate, volunteer at votelindamurphy.com.
Very cool. Friday, August 24th is that debate again. And, I wish you the best of luck. Thanks for taking some time out. I know you've been busy on the campaign trail and all that stuff, but appreciate you joining me on the ride.
Well, thank you, Mac. I appreciate it.
You got it. We'll talk to you soon. All right. It's 1520 KOKC. We're Talk Radio's New Generation.